On December 15th, 2025, in Brookline, Massachusetts, a man was shot multiple times in front of his home. There was no robbery, no fight, no prior threat. Just gunshots, 3 detonations in the night, and then silence. The man's name was Nuno Loureiro. He was 47 years old, a physicist, Portuguese, and the director of the most important nuclear fusion laboratory at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, the MIT, one of the most prestigious universities on the planet. That night, neighbors in the building heard the shots and thought someone was banging on a door. It took them a few seconds to understand what had happened. When police arrived, they found Loureiro on the ground with multiple bullet wounds. He was rushed to the hospital. He died hours later. Authorities opened a homicide investigation, and at first, everything seemed to follow the path of any unsolved crime. Just another case. Just another tragedy. But then the details started to appear. And when you start connecting the details of this case, something very uncomfortable begins to take shape. Because Nuno Loureiro was not just any scientist, and what he was researching was not just anything. The Plasma Science and Fusion Center at MIT is not a small laboratory. It brings together more than 250 researchers. It works on one of the most ambitious projects in modern science, reproducing on Earth the energy that powers the sun. That is what Loureiro was doing. Not in theory, not on paper, in practice. His specialty was theoretical plasma physics, specifically a process called magnetic reconnection, a phenomenon capable of releasing enormous amounts of energy in fractions of a second. Loureiro had spent years studying how to control that process, how to harness it, how to convert it into something that could generate clean electricity without fossil fuels, without emissions, without limit. Virtually unlimited energy for all of humanity. That was the goal. And according to his colleagues at MIT, he was closer than ever to making a significant breakthrough. He was appointed director of the center in May 2024, just a year and a half before his death. When police began investigating the crime, something caught their attention immediately. The killer stole nothing, did not attack anyone else, did not enter the home. He waited. Or at least that is what the circumstances suggest. Waited for Loureiro to be outside his home, and then fired 3 times, and disappeared. For days, no suspect had been identified, until 2 events that initially seemed unrelated began to connect. 2 days before Loureiro's murder, on December 13th, 2025, there was a mass shooting at Brown University, Rhode Island. An armed man entered the engineering building. He killed 2 students aged 19 and 18, wounded 9 others, and disappeared. Police searched for the suspect for days, until someone on Reddit posted something that would change the course of the investigation. A neighbor who had been near the building wrote, "I am dead serious. Police need to look for a gray Nissan with Florida plates." He had seen the man use an electronic key fob to unlock the car, had followed him, had noted the license plate, and had published it before authorities had anything. That tip led investigators to a rental car agency, to the rental contract, to the name. Claudio Manuel Neves Valente, 48 years old, Portuguese citizen, former doctoral student in physics at Brown University. He was found dead days later in a storage unit in New Hampshire. Self-inflicted gunshot wound. Authorities confirmed he was the same man who had shot Loureiro. And that was when the detail nobody expected appeared. Both were Portuguese. Both had studied physics. And according to authorities, it is believed that Loureiro and Valente studied in the same academic program in Portugal in the 1990s. Their paths had crossed. Perhaps they had known each other. Perhaps something had been left unresolved between them. The official version points to a personal vendetta, a story between two men who met 30 years ago. And that may be exactly what it was. But there is something more. Something the official version does not explain. Something that appears when you start looking into the history of that same laboratory. The Plasma Science and Fusion Center at MIT has a long history, and it has at least one other name associated with a violent death: Eugene Mallove. In 1989, Mallove was one of the first scientists to publicly denounce what he called an institutional cover-up. He had worked at MIT. He had seen the data firsthand. And he denounced that the results of certain experiments related to cold fusion had been altered, that the Department of Energy and MIT itself had concealed evidence of a phenomenon he considered real and reproducible: an anomalous excess of heat, energy that could not be explained with conventional models. For years, Mallove continued researching and publishing on his own. He founded a journal, gave lectures, kept talking, until 2004, when he was found brutally murdered in his own home. Two scientists from the same center. Two violent deaths, decades apart. Coincidence? Possibly. But when you start connecting this pattern to something that happened over a century ago, the question becomes much harder to ignore. To understand what follows, you have to go back, far back, all the way to the late 19th century, to a laboratory in New York, to a man who was considered one of the most extraordinary minds of his generation: Nikola Tesla. Inventor, physicist, electrical engineer. The man who designed the alternating current system that today powers virtually the entire modern world. But that is what official history remembers about him. What official history tends to leave out is what Tesla was trying to do before everything fell apart. Because Tesla did not just want to improve the electrical system. Tesla wanted to eliminate it. Or, more precisely, he wanted to make it unnecessary. Tesla spent years studying something that conventional physics of his era was barely beginning to touch: the nature of energy. Not energy as a resource, energy as the foundation of everything that exists. He reached a conclusion that sounded radical then, and that many still refuse to accept today. that the entire universe is vibration, frequency, energy in constant motion. If you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration, he said. And he did not say it as a metaphor. He said it as a technical description. Tesla believed energy was present everywhere, in virtually unlimited quantities, and that it was possible to extract it directly from the environment, without burning coal, without oil, without any fuel. Free energy for everyone, at no cost. That is what he tried to prove with his most ambitious project, Wardenclyffe Tower, a structure built on Long Island in the early 20th century, designed to transmit electrical energy wirelessly through the Earth's ionosphere. Not for a laboratory, not for a city, for the entire world. Tesla's vision was that any person at any point on the planet could access that energy, without cables, without costly infrastructure, without paying any company, free. And there lies the problem. Because at that moment, the electrical energy business was just being born. And those who controlled that business understood perfectly what Tesla was building. J.P. Morgan was Tesla's main financier, one of the wealthiest and most influential men in the United States. He had invested in Wardenclyffe Tower, but when he fully understood the scope of the project, when he realized that Tesla did not want to sell electricity, but give it away, he withdrew the funding. Without it, Tesla could not finish the tower. The project died. And with the project, Tesla began to die too. He lost his laboratory, lost his resources, lost access to those who could have helped him continue. In his final years, he lived alone in a hotel room in New York, without money, without public recognition for what he was truly trying to do, without anything. He died on January 7, 1943, in room 3327 of the Hotel New Yorker, alone. And hours after his death was confirmed, agents of the United States government entered that room. They confiscated all his documents, all his notebooks, all his research. The FBI classified the material. It was reviewed by a physicist named John Trump, Donald Trump's uncle. And much of that material was never returned, never published, never reached the public. Decades later, some documents were partially declassified. But the question remains, what exactly did those notebooks contain? What had Tesla developed in his final years of research? What was so important that the government acted within hours of his death? We don't know, and we will likely never know completely. But there is something we do know. Something that connects Tesla to Loureiro in a way that cannot be ignored. At first glance, Nikola Tesla and Nuno Loureiro seem like two completely different stories, different eras, different countries, completely separate contexts. But there is a thread, a very specific thread. Both dedicated their lives to the same question. How can humanity access unlimited energy? Tesla tried it with wireless energy. Loureiro tried it with nuclear fusion. Two different paths toward the same destination. and both encountered obstacles that went far beyond the scientific. Tesla encountered the withdrawal of funding at the exact moment his project was becoming viable. Loureiro encountered 3 bullets in front of his home. Are they comparable? Not necessarily. Are they identical? No. But the pattern that emerges when you put them together is difficult to completely dismiss. Because nuclear fusion is not a minor project. It is exactly what its name suggests. The promise of reproducing on Earth the process that powers the sun. A successful fusion reactor would produce enormous amounts of energy, using hydrogen as fuel, the most abundant element in the universe, without long-lasting radioactive waste, without carbon emissions, without dependence on any oil-producing country, without the need to maintain any energy oligopoly. And that is exactly what makes this story uncomfortable. Because entire industries are built on the premise that energy is scarce, that it must be extracted, that it must be paid for, that someone must control access to it. Energy is one of the biggest businesses in human history. Trillions of dollars, entire empires, entire wars built on that premise. And every time someone gets too close to breaking it, something happens. There is an official explanation for Loureiro's death, and it may be completely true. 2 men who studied together in Portugal 30 years ago. A personal story that was never resolved. A long-standing vendetta. That explanation exists. It has a name. It has context. And authorities confirmed it. But there are questions that explanation does not fully close. Why now? Why, at the exact moment Loureiro was directing the most important fusion center in the world? Why would a man who represented Portugal at the International Physics Olympiad, a brilliant student, wait 3 decades to act? What happened during those 30 years? What drove him to cross an ocean, rent a car, stay in a Boston hotel, and plan a university shooting before killing his target? There may be personal answers to each of those questions. There may be a story of resentment, failure, and obsession that explains everything. That too is possible. But what makes this case different from an ordinary crime is not what is known. It is what doesn't close. Because a man who failed academically 30 years ago does not usually come back to kill the man who succeeded, precisely when that man is closer than ever to changing the history of energy. Coincidences exist. The problem is when there are too many in the same place. Eugene Mallove, MIT researcher, denounced the cover-up of cold fusion data, murdered in 2004. Nikola Tesla designed a free wireless energy system for the world, defunded at the exact moment his project was becoming viable. His documents confiscated after his death. Nuno Loureiro, director of the most important fusion laboratory at MIT, murdered in December 2025. 3 cases, 3 different decades, 3 men working in the same direction. Energy, free access for everyone. Is it a deliberate pattern? We cannot claim that. Is it an organized conspiracy connecting all 3 cases? There is no evidence to confirm it. But there is something that is real. Something that does not require theories to exist. The world as it functions today depends on energy remaining scarce, remaining costly, remaining controlled. And every time someone gets too close to changing that, history records an obstacle, sometimes financial, sometimes institutional, sometimes something more definitive. In his final years, Tesla left several statements that history recorded, but that are rarely placed in the right context. He said that all people everywhere should have access to free sources of energy. He said that electrical energy was present everywhere in unlimited quantities. He said it could power the entire world's machinery without the need for coal, oil, or gas. He did not say it as a utopia. He said it as a technical description of something he believed he had understood. And he also said something else, something that sounds very different when you read it today. Science is but a perversion of itself unless it has, as its ultimate goal, the betterment of humanity. Tesla died alone, without money, with his documents confiscated, and with the conviction that he had found something the world was not yet ready to receive, or that someone was not willing to let the world receive. On December 15th, 2025, Nuno Loureiro stepped outside his home in Brookline. 3 shots in the night, and silence after. His children were sleeping nearby. His laboratory had 250 researchers waiting for him the next day. His work was further along than ever, and someone knew exactly where he would be that night. The official version says it was a personal vendetta. 30 years of accumulated resentment. 2 Portuguese men who studied together and took different paths. Maybe that's true. It probably is. But there is something that version cannot explain. The timing. Why now? Why not 10 years ago? Why not 20? Why exactly when Loureiro was directing the most important fusion center on the planet? Why exactly when nuclear fusion was closer than ever to becoming a reality? Maybe it is a coincidence. Coincidences exist. But there is one thing history teaches with brutal clarity. And it is that power does not wait. Power acts first, always first. Now go back 100 years. Tesla is in a hotel room, alone, without money, without allies, with decades of research written in notebooks no one else has read. Nobody killed him with a bullet. It was not necessary. They pulled his funding at exactly the right moment. They closed doors on him one by one. They let him age in silence while the world forgot about him. And when he died, it took them hours, just hours, to enter that room and take everything. Everything he had written, everything he had thought, everything he never got to publish. Classified, stored, gone. What was in those notebooks that justified that speed? What did they find that they could not let the world see? Nobody knows. And that is exactly the answer that should disturb us most. Not the mystery itself, but the silence surrounding it. Because this is what connects Tesla and Loureiro beyond physics, beyond laboratories, beyond the years that separate them. Both reached the same point. The point where knowledge stops being abstract and becomes a real threat to those who control the world. Tesla reached that point, and they slowly ruined him. Loureiro reached that point, and someone appeared in the dark with a weapon. Different methods, the same result. The knowledge never arrived. Humanity did not receive what it could have received, and the energy business continued exactly as before. As if nothing had happened. As if nobody had died. As if nobody had spent decades trying to change something fundamental. Today the world still depends on oil, still paying energy bills, still waiting for a clean energy solution that always seems to be just around the corner. Just almost. Never quite. Always promised. Always postponed. And every time someone gets too close, something happens. Always with a reasonable explanation. Always with an official version that closes the file. Always clean. Always orderly. Always archived. But the knowledge those people carried with them, that doesn't get archived. That doesn't come back.
That dies with them. That question has no official answer, and it never will. Because the answer died with them. It died in a hotel room in New York in 1943. It died on a dark street in Brookline in 2025. And that is what nobody stops to consider. Not what they knew, but what we don't know. Because they are no longer here. How many years behind are we? How many diseases could have been cured with unlimited, accessible energy? How many wars would never have happened if oil had never mattered? How many millions of people died in the dark, waiting for something that already existed, but that someone decided should not exist? We don't know. And that is precisely the most disturbing part of this story. Not what was hidden from us, but everything we built on top of that void. Everything we take as normal, as inevitable, as natural, without knowing that perhaps someone decided it would be this way a long time ago.